Willow Creek always woke up slow. The street still wore last night's quiet when the first cars rolled past the coffee shop, headlights cutting through the pale mist. Storefronts with old brick facades looked like they'd been standing for 100 years, the hardware store with its squeaky door, the bakery that always smelled like cinnamon by 6 a.m., and the elementary school perched on a gentle slope like it had been watching over the town forever. Evelyn Carter pulled into the staff lot in her old silver sedan, the engine giving that familiar low rumble before it cut off. She sat for a moment with both hands on the steering wheel, breathing in the silence before the day began. Her cardigan was navy today, buttoned neatly over a floral blouse, and pinned with the tiny enamel book brooch her students loved to point at. In the passenger seat, her red canvas tote brimmed with graded homework, a pack of stickers, and a thermos of black coffee. The minute she stepped into room 12, it was like walking into her second home. The walls were lined with student art, spelling words, and inspirational posters she'd collected over the years, "You matter here, kindness counts," and one in bold rainbow letters, "Mistakes mean you're learning." She laid out the math tubs, rearranged a row of library books so the spines faced neatly outward, and wrote the date on the whiteboard in looping cursive. The smell of crayons and sharpened pencils filled the air, a scent she privately thought should be bottled. By 8:10, the hallways swelled with the sound of sneakers squeaking on tile, backpacks thumping, and kids calling to each other. The door opened, and there she was, Sophie Harrington. 9 years old, shoulder-length brown hair tucked behind one ear, purple backpack nearly swallowing her small frame. She wasn't loud, but she had a way of being noticed, a quiet brightness that made people look twice without knowing why. "Good morning, Miss Carter," Sophie said softly, placing her backpack at her desk. "Good morning, Bug," Evelyn replied without thinking, the nickname slipping out like it belonged. Sophie smiled at it, like she knew it was hers alone. Morning meeting started, and Evelyn sat cross-legged on the rug with her students, asking, "What's something you're proud of from yesterday?" Hands shot up. "I helped my sister study." "I didn't cry at the dentist." "I made pancakes all by myself." When it was Sophie's turn, she hesitated, then said, "I finished my book." The mom in it used to sing "Moon River" in the kitchen. A ripple of stillness passed through the group, kids somehow knowing this was a moment you didn't interrupt. "What does that make you feel?" Evelyn asked gently. "Warm," Sophie said after a pause. "And a little sad. But good sad." Evelyn smiled softly. "Good sad is a kind of brave." Later that day, Sophie lingered after the bell. "Can I finish my art project?" she asked. "Of course," Evelyn said, watching Sophie add careful strokes to her autumn leaf drawing. Outside, a sleek black SUV pulled up to the curb. The driver's door opened, and Michael Harrington stepped out. He was all clean lines and quiet confidence, navy wool coat, leather watch, dark hair neatly combed. The kind of man who carried himself like he was used to being in control of any room he entered. But the moment he stepped into room 12, something in his stance shifted. He scanned the bright, child-sized space, the tiny chairs, the paper cutouts taped to the walls, until his gaze landed on Sophie. His features softened instantly. "Hey, kiddo," he said. "Hi, Dad," Sophie beamed. "I'm almost done." Michael's eyes moved to Evelyn. "Thank you for letting her stay after." "I know it's late." Evelyn shook her head. "She's a joy." "I don't mind." They exchanged a brief smile, polite, professional, but there was something under it. A small, unspoken recognition neither dared to name. That evening, the Harrington mansion glowed in the cool October dusk. The sprawling white home sat at the end of a tree-lined drive, all elegant lines and perfectly manicured hedges. Inside, the kitchen gleamed with polished stone countertops and warm brass fixtures. Michael plated roasted chicken and vegetables while Sophie set the table. The clink of cutlery was the only sound until Sophie cleared her throat. "Dad? Why don't you marry Miss Carter?" Michael froze mid-reach for the pepper grinder. "I'm sorry, What? Sophie shrugged innocently. You're single. She's single. She's nice, she's pretty, and she likes me. And you like her. I can tell. Michael blinked, caught between laughing and choking. Soph, it's not that simple. Why not? She pressed. Because, he paused, searching for the kind of adult answer that didn't sound like an excuse. Grown-up relationships are complicated. Are you scared? The question landed harder than she could have known. He hesitated. Sometimes. Then maybe you'd be less scared with her, Sophie said matter-of-factly, spearing a carrot. Michael let out a low chuckle, shaking his head. Finish your dinner, matchmaker. Across town, Evelyn sat on her couch, papers spread across the coffee table. She graded spelling quizzes, her pen leaving little encouraging notes in the margins. Her phone buzzed with a text from her friend Dana, another teacher. Open house tomorrow. Wish me luck. Evelyn typed back, met Sophie's dad today. A lot of watch and shoes. Dana replied instantly, oh. That one. Be careful, Ev. Always, Evelyn wrote, setting the phone aside. She turned off the lamp, letting the apartment go dim except for the glow from the streetlight outside. The quiet pressed in around her, not unwelcome, but noticeable. The next evening, Willow Creek Elementary buzzed with the fall open house. Parents crowded the halls, voices overlapping in the warm, slightly stuffy air. Evelyn stood by the smart board in room 12, greeting families, explaining the curriculum, answering questions about reading levels and math goals. The door opened, and in walked Michael and Sophie. Michael in a dark sweater, Sophie in a yellow dress with a ribbon headband. Conversations paused briefly. Wealth had its own gravity in a small town. Sophie ran up with a paper leaf in her hand. Miss Carter, I made this for the tree. Evelyn read the words written in careful pencil, I am thankful for the way you listen. It makes me brave. Her throat tightened. That's going right in the center, she said. Michael watched the exchange quietly. His gaze lingered on Evelyn longer than it should have. They made their way around the room, Sophie proudly showing her father the kindness jar, the reading corner, the marble tally that would earn extra recess. Evelyn noticed the way Michael listened to Sophie, really listened. When the evening ended, most parents had trickled out. Michael stayed back for a moment. She's braver with you, he said. She's brave with herself, Evelyn replied. I just hand her the mirror. They stood there in a quiet that wasn't awkward. Then Sophie reappeared, asking for a picture. Michael's shoulder brushed Evelyn's in the frame, neither of them moving away. If you've been pulled into this slow burn connection, make sure to like this video and subscribe, because Sophie's matchmaking is just getting started, and you won't want to miss what she does next. Saturday brought the annual Willow Creek Fall Festival, hay bales, pumpkin pies, the smell of cider in the crisp air. Evelyn volunteered at the face painting booth, her hair pulled back and an old sweatshirt protecting her from stray glitter. Miss Carter. Sophie bounded up, Michael just a step behind. What can I paint for you today? Evelyn asked. A moon, Sophie said. And music notes. Like tiny birds. Evelyn smiled at the memory. Got it. She worked carefully, her brush moving in gentle strokes until the design curved across Sophie's temple. Michael watched from nearby, hands in his coat pockets. He'd seen plenty of teachers in his life, polite, professional, but something about Evelyn's way with Sophie went deeper. When Evelyn handed Sophie a mirror, the little girl's eyes lit up. I love it. Thank you. She hugged her teacher without hesitation. Michael stepped forward, pulling out his wallet. Let me. Donations go to the library, Evelyn said, nodding toward the jar. He slipped in a bill, trying not to overdo it. We'll see you at the pumpkin judging. Three-legged race, Evelyn corrected with a grin. I'll be cheering for anyone who stays on their feet. Michael laughed, an unguarded, warm laugh that surprised even him. That night, Michael sat in his home office scrolling through photos from the day. Sophie with her moon face paint. Him mid-laugh. And one Marta had snapped without him noticing. Him and Evelyn in the same frame, both smiling at Sophie. Across town, Evelyn folded laundry while replaying moments from the festival. The way Michael's eyes softened when he looked at Sophie. The warmth in his laugh when she teased him. She shook her head, reminding herself of the rules she lived by, rules that had kept her safe in a world where people sometimes judged her twice before trusting her once. But still, she couldn't quite stop smiling. Sophie Harrington was a girl who didn't believe in leaving good ideas to collect dust. And in her mind, convincing her father to marry Miss Carter wasn't just a good idea, it was the best idea she'd ever had. By Monday morning, she had already mapped out a plan in the back of her math notebook. The strategy was simple in theory: make sure Dad and Miss Carter saw each other often, get them to talk about things other than school, and show them how good they could be together. Easy. At breakfast, she hurried through her cereal, her feet swinging under the island stools. Her father, across from her with his coffee, noticed her unusual energy. "You're in a hurry," Michael said, raising an eyebrow. "Just excited for school," Sophie replied with a shrug, keeping her tone casual. "Excited, huh? Should I be worried?" "Nope," she said, eyes innocent, already thinking about her first move. That afternoon, when the final bell rang, Sophie did what any determined matchmaker would do. She left her reading log neatly on top of her desk. She knew Miss Carter would notice. She also knew her dad hated when she forgot things. When she slid into the SUV at pickup, she made no mention of it. It took less than an hour for Michael to walk back into room 12, holding the paper in his hand. "This was sitting right in plain sight on your desk," he said, amused. Evelyn took it with a polite smile. "That's the second time this week." "Maybe she's trying to get me in trouble," Michael joked. From across the room, Sophie, busy pretending to sort colored pencils, hid a smirk. Michael's gaze landed on the bulletin board. The autumn trees filling out. "Only a few spots left," Evelyn said, glancing at the orange and red leaves. "Shame," Michael murmured. "I like autumn." There was a pause, just long enough to register, before Sophie broke in, "Can we go now, Dad?" Tuesday morning, Evelyn walked into the staff lounge with her travel mug, heading toward the fridge. She caught two teachers near the copier, voices low but sharp. "The Harrington kid's teacher, right?" "Yeah. I heard she's been spending extra time with him." "You know, him." Evelyn froze for a beat, heat rising in her cheeks. She stepped forward, and both women glanced up. "Morning," she said evenly, sliding her lunch into the fridge. They mumbled greetings, the conversation dissolving under the hum of the copier. Evelyn's shoulders stayed tense as she left the room. She'd been here before, the quiet suspicion, the subtle weight of being noticed for the wrong reasons. That evening, Sophie sat at the kitchen island with her math homework. Michael was chopping vegetables, his sleeves rolled up. "Dad," Sophie said suddenly, "what if we invited Miss Carter to the fall festival this weekend?" Michael kept his eyes on the cutting board. "She'll probably be there anyway. But we could do something together. Like the pumpkin carving contest." He gave her a sidelong look. "Soph, she's your teacher. She's busy. And it might be a little much." "You always say no before you try," Sophie countered, her voice tinged with stubbornness. Michael sighed. "I'll think about it." Wednesday's dismissal brought an unexpected downpour. Most kids sprinted for the buses under coats and umbrellas. Sophie was slower, stuffing papers into her backpack. By the time she stepped outside, the buses had pulled away and her dad's SUV wasn't there yet. "Come inside," Evelyn called from the doorway. "I'm fine," Sophie said, though her voice was small. Evelyn grabbed her umbrella and crossed the puddled sidewalk. You'll catch cold. Come on. Minutes later, Michael jogged in from the parking lot, rain darkening his coat. Relief washed over his face when he saw Sophie. Traffic, he said, brushing water from his hair. She was fine, Evelyn reassured him. Michael looked at her and said quietly, "Thank you." It was the kind of thank you that carried more than politeness. Thursday morning, at his construction firm's office, Michael was reviewing blueprints when his friend Ben leaned in. "So, rumor has it you've been spending time with Sophie's teacher." Michael looked up, brows knitting. "Where'd you hear that?" Ben smirked. "Small town, man. People notice. Drop-offs, pickups, staying late." Michael's jaw tightened. "She's Sophie's teacher." "That's it." "Hey, I'm not judging," Ben said with a shrug. "She's beautiful." Michael turned back to the blueprints, unwilling to give the conversation more oxygen. That afternoon, Michael arrived early for Sophie's dentist appointment. He found her in the reading corner, sitting cross-legged beside Evelyn, who held an open book between them. "And then the fox said, sometimes the smallest step in the right direction ends up being the biggest step of your life," Evelyn read. Sophie leaned in, her eyes wide. Michael lingered in the doorway, watching, before clearing his throat. "Sorry to interrupt," he said. Evelyn smiled. "We were just finishing a chapter." As Sophie gathered her things, Michael said quietly, "She loves reading with you." "It's mutual," Evelyn replied. Friday afternoon, Sophie lingered at her desk while the other kids filed out. "Miss Carter," she asked, "do you like pumpkin pie?" "I do," Evelyn said, smiling. "Why?" "Because my dad makes the best pumpkin pie. You should come over for dinner." Evelyn blinked. "That's very kind, Sophie, but..." "She's free Saturday," Sophie announced when Michael arrived. Michael looked from his daughter to Evelyn. "Soph." Evelyn laughed softly. "She's persuasive." "Dangerously so," Michael agreed. Saturday evening, the fall festival was alive with golden string lights, the smell of kettle corn, and laughter rising into the crisp air. Evelyn spotted Michael and Sophie by the ring toss booth. Sophie waved, and before Evelyn knew it, they were side by side, cheering Sophie on. When Michael finally landed a ring, Evelyn clapped. "Not bad. Beginner's luck," he replied. They crossed paths again by the caramel apples, and later near the hayride line. Each time, their eyes met for just a beat too long. By the time Evelyn walked home under the street lamps, she could feel it, Sophie's plan was working, even if she wasn't ready to admit it. By Monday, Willow Creek Elementary felt different. Evelyn Carter had taught here long enough to know when something was in the air. You couldn't see it, not exactly, but you could hear it, the small breaks in conversation when she stepped into the teacher's lounge, the sidelong glances in the hallway that didn't quite meet her eyes, the faint uptick of voices afterward. It was the kind of thing you felt in your bones. She made her way down the hall toward room 12, smiling at students along the way. A second grader named Kyle grinned and waved from his spot in the reading corner of the hallway, and Evelyn bent slightly to return his wave. Small kindnesses mattered, especially on days when the air felt thick with something unspoken. Inside room 12, she found Sophie already at her desk, hair tucked neatly behind her ear, pencil poised over a worksheet she'd clearly started before class. "Good morning, Bug," Evelyn said. Sophie's face lit up. "Good morning, Miss Carter." The warmth in the greeting settled something in Evelyn's chest. No matter what floated around in the adult world, in here the truth was simple, she was here for the children, and they knew it. After lunch, Principal Harding called Evelyn into her office. The space was tidy, almost too tidy, with shelves lined by symmetrical stacks of binders, a large desk polished to a shine, and a faint citrus scent that made the place feel impersonal. "Evelyn, please sit." Evelyn lowered herself into the chair, careful to keep her posture open but alert. Harding folded her hands, her nails short and neat. I wanted to bring something to your attention. There's been some chatter about you and Mr. Harrington. Evelyn's face didn't move, though her pulse ticked higher. Chatter, she repeated evenly. You know how small towns are, Harding continued, her voice carefully neutral. Parents see things, a parent picking up late, conversations at the fall festival, and they make assumptions. I've had a couple of inquiries. Inquiries, Evelyn said again. I'm not suggesting anything inappropriate has happened, Harding said quickly, leaning forward slightly. But perception can be as powerful as reality. You might want to be mindful. Evelyn's eyes held steady. I am always mindful, Principal Harding. But I won't compromise the way I do my job because someone prefers a rumor to the truth. Harding's lips pressed together briefly, then she nodded. I understand. I just wanted you to be aware. Evelyn stood, smoothing her cardigan. I'm aware. She walked out with her chin high, but inside, something tight coiled in her chest. She'd been here before, the shadow of doubt following her more closely than it followed others. At the same time, across town, Michael was walking the perimeter of one of his construction sites, a row of future Riverview homes, skeletal frames rising from the foundation like bare ribs. The sharp scent of sawdust mixed with the chill of the October air. Ben, his foreman, approached with a clipboard in hand. Hey, you hear the chatter? Michael looked up from inspecting a beam. What chatter? Ben smirked. About you and Sophie's teacher. My wife says it's already making the rounds on the PTA threads. Michael's jaw tightened. That's ridiculous. Small town, Ben shrugged. People get bored. They start talking. Some are saying it's friendly. Others are wondering what's really going on. Michael set down the blueprint he'd been reviewing. What's going on is she's an excellent teacher who looks out for my daughter. That's it. Ben held up his hands. Hey, I'm just the messenger. But Michael was already walking away, his mind not on construction schedules anymore. Wednesday afternoon, Evelyn was tidying the reading corner after dismissal when the sharp tap of heels approached her doorway. She turned to see Margaret Langford, the kind of PTA member who treated volunteer work like an Olympic sport and gossip like currency. Miss Carter, Mrs. Langford said, smiling without warmth. Mrs. Langford, Evelyn replied politely. I just wanted to offer a little, friendly advice. People notice things. Especially when one of the parents is someone like Michael Harrington. Evelyn kept her tone even. My focus is, and always will be, on teaching my students. Mrs. Langford tilted her head, as though pitying her. Of course. Just remember, rumors have a way of growing. When she left, Evelyn remained still for a moment, gripping the edge of a bookshelf until her knuckles whitened. She hated how familiar this felt, the weight of being scrutinized more closely than others. That evening, as the last of the light faded from the sky, Michael drove to the school. He found Evelyn locking her classroom door. Can we talk? He asked. She studied his face for a moment before nodding. All right. They walked a short distance down the quiet hallway, their footsteps echoing off the tile. I heard some of what's being said, Michael began. I don't like it. I don't like that you're in the middle of it because of me. Evelyn gave a short laugh, without humor. You think this is the first time I've been the subject of someone's assumptions? No, Michael. But now they can frame it as a question of my professionalism, and that's different. I can shut it down, he said firmly. Be careful, she warned. Sometimes defending someone only makes the gossip spread faster. He looked at her then, something fierce in his gaze. I don't care about the gossip. I care about you and Sophie. The hallway felt suddenly smaller, the air thicker. Evelyn took a step back toward her door. Good night, Michael. 2 days later, the third graders loaded onto yellow buses for their annual trip to Willow Creek Nature Preserve. The air was crisp, the sky a high, pale blue streaked with clouds. Evelyn moved up and down the aisle, checking lunches and clipboards. Sophie sat near the middle, chatting with her friend Emma, her inhaler clipped neatly to her backpack. The day unfolded peacefully, scavenger hunts for leaves, magnifying glasses over moss, sketches of birds in notebooks. It was near the end of the afternoon when Evelyn noticed Sophie's pace slowing on the trail back toward the visitor center. "You all right, Bug?" Evelyn asked, kneeling beside her. Sophie nodded, but her breaths were shallow, her shoulders lifting high. "Just tired." Evelyn's teacher instincts kicked in. "Let's take a break." Emma, wide-eyed, said, "She's wheezing a little." Evelyn unhooked Sophie's backpack, found the inhaler, and crouched beside her. "Okay, sweet pea, we're going to take 2 puffs, nice and slow." Sophie obeyed, her small hand gripping Evelyn's as she inhaled the medicine. Color began to creep back into her cheeks, but Evelyn didn't let go until she was certain the worst had passed. Michael was in the middle of a client meeting when his phone buzzed with an unknown number. He stepped out into the hall, answering immediately. "Mr. Harrington. This is Evelyn Carter. Sophie's fine now, but she had some trouble with her asthma on the field trip. We managed it, but I thought you should know." Michael's voice sharpened. "Where are you?" "At the preserve. We're heading back soon." "I'm on my way," he said, already grabbing his coat. By the time the buses pulled into the school parking lot, Michael was there, striding toward them. His eyes went straight to Sophie, who was stepping carefully off the bus. He scooped her into a hug before she could even speak. "You scared me, Bug." "I'm okay, Dad," she murmured against his chest. Michael glanced over her head at Evelyn. Their eyes met, and without words, she gave him a small nod, letting him know she'd taken care of Sophie as if she were her own. Michael insisted on taking Sophie to Dr. Patel for a checkup. To his surprise, Evelyn came along, sliding into the back seat next to Sophie. The clinic smelled faintly of antiseptic and coffee. Michael filled out the intake form while Evelyn sat with Sophie, asking about her favorite part of the field trip and keeping her distracted until the nurse called them in. When Sophie disappeared behind the exam room door with Dr. Patel, Michael dropped into a chair beside Evelyn in the waiting area. "You didn't have to come," he said quietly. "I wanted to," she replied, equally quiet. For a while, they sat in a silence that wasn't awkward, just waited with something neither wanted to unpack here. Back at the Harrington house, the porch light spilled gold across the driveway as Michael walked Evelyn to her car. "Thank you," he said, his voice low. "Not just for today. For everything you do for her." Evelyn's eyes softened. "She's easy to care about." Michael's mouth twitched into something almost like a smile. "So are you." Her breath caught, but she didn't answer. "Good night, Michael." "Good night, Evelyn." As she drove away, both knew something had shifted. The line between parent and teacher was no longer as sharp as it used to be, and neither of them seemed eager to redraw it. The week after Sophie's asthma episode felt like a quiet shift in the air, subtle enough that no one would call it out loud, but real enough that both Evelyn and Michael noticed it. For Evelyn, it came in small moments. Sophie waving a little longer at pickup. Michael's thank you text the next morning, short, simple, but ending with "I mean it." For Michael, it was the memory of the waiting room, the way Evelyn had stayed without hesitation, the calm in her voice when she told him Sophie was fine, the hand she'd kept on his daughter's shoulder until her breathing slowed. They'd both gone back to the usual script, "Hello, how's she doing? See you tomorrow," but the word sat on top of something warmer, something neither quite dared to name. By Friday afternoon, Sophie had found a new angle for her matchmaking efforts. It started when Evelyn mentioned, almost offhandedly, that she was volunteering to help set up the school's charity auction next week. "My dad's good at that stuff," Sophie said immediately. "Oh." Evelyn smiled. "He's organized. And tall." He can hang banners and things. Evelyn laughed. Good to know. When Michael arrived at pickup, Sophie wasted no time. Dad, Miss Carter needs help setting up the auction. Michael raised an eyebrow. Does she now? Yeah. You're tall, Sophie said as if this alone made him indispensable. Evelyn shook her head. Don't listen to her. We have plenty of volunteers. Michael's lips quirked. I'll think about it. It was nearly dark on Saturday when Evelyn's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, surprised to see Michael's name. Michael, heard you're hanging banners Monday. Need an extra set of hands? She stared at the message for a moment, then typed back, if you're sure you want to risk glitter in your hair. His reply came quickly, I've survived worse. The school gym smelled faintly of floor polish and cardboard. Volunteers bustled around with boxes of donated items, strings of fairy lights, and tables to be covered with linen. Michael arrived in rolled-up sleeves, looking entirely out of place and yet somehow right at home. Where do you want me? He asked. Evelyn pointed to a stack of folded banners. We're hanging these along the back wall. As they worked side by side, she noticed how easily they fell into rhythm, him holding things in place, her stepping back to check alignment. You've done this before, she remarked. I've been roped into more fundraisers than I can count, he said, securing a knot. Comes with running a business in a small town. And having a daughter in school, she added. That too. He glanced down at her, his expression softening. I like helping with her world. Something in her chest tightened at that, the way he said her world, as if he saw her life as something worth protecting. During a break, they sat on the stage steps with paper cups of coffee. The gym had quieted for a moment, the other volunteers off in the storage room. You grew up here? Michael asked. Evelyn shook her head. No. Moved here after college. My grandmother raised me in Atlanta. He nodded slowly. Was she a teacher too? No, but she believed in learning. Every Sunday, we'd go to the library. I think she wanted me to have the kind of stability she never had. Michael looked at her for a moment. She'd be proud of you. It caught her off guard, the certainty in his voice, as if he knew something about her life he couldn't possibly know. She turned the question back on him. What about you? Did you always know you'd run your father's company? Michael's mouth curved in a faint smile. Not exactly. I studied architecture. Wanted to design things, not just build them. But after my dad died, the business needed someone to take over. I figured I could keep it going until I figured out what I wanted. And I'm still figuring it out, he said quietly. The auction was a swirl of chatter, clinking glasses, and the scent of catered hors d'oeuvres. Evelyn moved between tables, making sure the bid sheet stayed in place. Michael arrived with Sophie, who wore a navy dress and a proud smile. She stuck close to her dad at first, but Evelyn caught her glancing their way more than once, as if mentally noting progress in her scheme. When a light bulb over one of the display tables flickered out, Michael grabbed a step ladder without being asked. Evelyn spotted him adjusting it with practiced ease, his sleeves rolled again. You really can't resist fixing things, can you? She teased as she passed. He glanced down at her, a spark in his eyes. Only the important ones. Later that evening, as Evelyn was helping close up, a man in a gray suit approached her. His name tag read Daniel Price, School Board. Miss Carter, he said with a cordial smile. Enjoying the evening? It's been a success, she replied. Indeed. And I see you've had plenty of support. His eyes flicked briefly toward Michael, who was talking with Sophie across the room. Evelyn's shoulders stiffened. Yes. We've had a lot of wonderful volunteers. Price's smile didn't falter, but there was something measured in it. Well, keep up the good work. The board always appreciates teachers who represent the school well. When he walked away, the implication hung in the air. She hated how her stomach knotted, the feeling that every public appearance with Michael might be another tally in some invisible ledger. The following Friday, Sophie bounded up to Evelyn at dismissal. "You have to come to dinner tonight," she said. "Sophie. My dad's making chili. He's really good at it. Please." Michael appeared in the doorway, his expression amused but not entirely opposed. "You're welcome to join us," he said. Evelyn hesitated only a moment before nodding. "All right. But only if Sophie promises to eat more than just cornbread." The Harrington kitchen was warm with the smell of chili and baking cornbread. Evelyn felt the faintest edge of nerves as she followed Sophie to the island. Michael handed her a glass of wine. "Hope you like it spicy," he said. "I can handle spice," she replied with a smile. Dinner was easy, Sophie chattering about school projects, Evelyn telling a funny story about a student mistaking a stapler for a phone. Michael listened more than he spoke, but when he did, it was with that quiet attention that made people feel heard. Afterward, Sophie darted off to work on her drawing, leaving Michael and Evelyn in the kitchen, stacking dishes. They stood close at the sink, her rinsing, him drying. At one point, their hands brushed as he took a plate from her, and both paused for a fraction longer than necessary. "Thank you for coming," Michael said, his voice lower now. "Thank you for inviting me." He set the plate down, turning slightly toward her. For a heartbeat, it felt like the space between them might close, until Sophie's voice called from the other room, "Miss Carter, come see my drawing." They both stepped back, almost in unison. Evelyn smiled, but her heart was still beating faster than it should have. On Monday morning, Principal Harding asked Evelyn to step into her office again. "Evelyn, I received a call from a board member this weekend," she began. "There's concern about perceptions. Particularly after the auction and the fact that you've been seen socially with Mr. Harrington." Evelyn's stomach dropped. "Socially?" "I was at his home for dinner at his daughter's invitation." Harding's expression was sympathetic but firm. "I understand. But the board is watching closely. You may want to consider putting some space between you and the family." Evelyn left the office feeling like she was walking a narrow line on a windy day. One wrong step, and the work she loved could be snatched away. That evening, she found Michael waiting by her classroom door after the last student left. "They're threatening your job, aren't they?" he said without preamble. Her eyes flicked up to his. "They're saying it's about appearances." Michael's jaw clenched. "If I'm going to lose you, I'd rather it be because you don't want me, not because someone else says I can't have you." The words landed heavy in the space between them, the first unfiltered admission of something deeper. Evelyn didn't know what to say, so she didn't say anything. She just held his gaze, letting the silence speak. Whitaker adjusted her papers. Her mouth made the shape of "thank you" without entirely committing to it. "We appreciate your perspective, Mr. Harrington." Her eyes moved, perhaps strategically, to Evelyn. "Miss Carter, would you like to make a statement?" The room tilted by a degree. Evelyn stood, not because she wanted to perform but because people who teach children to use their voices must use theirs when asked. She didn't bring the notes she'd written at her table next to the neglected glass of water. She brought exactly what she tells her class on presentation days: stand where you can be seen. Speak like you trust the sentence to hold. "I'm here for the kids," she said, and heard Sophie's drawing in her own mouth. It steadied her. "I am a teacher because an old woman with hands like a map took me to the library every Sunday and told me learning would keep my heart from folding in on itself. I am a teacher because a fifth-grade teacher showed me how to do fractions on a torn napkin and told me I was not behind, I was becoming. I am a teacher because I believe school can be the kindest room in a child's day. That is my ethic." Her hands wanted to shake, she let them be still by letting them rest on the back of the chair in front of her. "I have met with Mr. Harrington where teachers meet with parents, at a child-sized table under paper stars and construction paper leaves. I have emailed at night about reading logs and about nightmares. I have stood in the rain with an umbrella and an inhaler. That is not impropriety. That is the job. And if there are people who do not know the difference, I can teach it. A ripple moved. Some discomfort. Some relief. Truth rearranges furniture. Before anyone could claim the air again, another voice threaded up through it, a child's, bright and small and absolutely not afraid of microphones. I want to say something, Sophie said, standing on the chair so the world would have to see her, then immediately stepping down because she remembered safety rules. Someone brought her a portable mic like an offering. She held it with both hands because 9-year-old courage deserves anchors. My name is Sophie, she said, like it was enough. Miss Carter makes me brave. She makes me feel like my mom's songs, not the sad part, the warm part. She helps me say when I'm stuck. She helps me when I can't breathe and makes me laugh after so I won't be scared later. She tells me being good sad is still brave. I think if you take her away from our class you will make a mistake that is bigger than your papers. It wasn't a speech. It was a door opening and a room getting light. When the board called a brief recess for deliberation, people stood and broke the tension by sitting differently. The grandfather in the seed cap wiped his eye like dust had flown in. A PTA mom in a cream sweater stared at the floor until her cheeks calmed down. Dana leaned into Evelyn's shoulder. Michael didn't sit. He stood beside Sophie like a lighthouse. The board returned, papers shuffled into official stacks. Whitaker found her script. After review, she said, the board finds no breach of conduct. However, we affirm our commitment to clear professional boundaries. She nodded toward Evelyn with something that looked a little like respect and a little like relief. Miss Carter remains in good standing. Applause started in odd corners, mismatched claps that found each other the way birds find formation. It was not thunderous. It was real. Evelyn sat down because her knees had just remembered they were knees. Dana laughed into her hair the way friends do when laughing is the thing that keeps you from sobbing. Michael closed his eyes for the length of one breath, and then he looked at Evelyn the way you look at a person you've wanted to thank correctly and finally have the right language. Outside, the night had cleared. Air cold enough to make noses pink. The parking lot lights made halos on the asphalt where old oil had told its long story. People spilled out in the way towns do, some headed for home dinners gone a little cold, some lingering to say the thing they didn't find during the meeting. Michael caught up with Evelyn under a lamp that turned their breath into small ghosts. Sophie ran ahead and then back again, orbiting as if tethered by a string you couldn't see. You didn't have to do that, Evelyn said, which is what people say when they are grateful and startled all at once. Yes, I did, Michael answered, which is what people say when they have finally put their spine where their mouth has been. You risked something tonight, she said. Some things are only valuable if you're willing to risk them, he replied, and then softened it. I was risking the wrong thing by staying quiet. They stood there and let the silence tell the truth the way it can when the hard part has been said. Evelyn noticed the way the light caught in the thread of his coat, the way his shoulders looked when they were no longer carrying the weight of not speaking. He noticed the way her mouth relaxed at the edges when she wasn't bracing. Cider, Sophie announced, startling both of them into a grin. Miss Carter has to have cider. There's a winter festival on Friday. Miss Carter, you're coming. I am. Evelyn asked. Michael lifted a shoulder, yielding to a force older than both of them. Seems that way. The winter festival arrives in every American town the same way, like someone took a storybook and shook it over a field. Strings of white lights draped from lamppost to lamppost, paper snowflakes taped to windows that fogged with laughter, hot chocolate that tasted like childhood even if you'd never had that kind before. The playground wore a lace of frost. Somewhere, a choir tried for harmony and landed in joy instead. Evelyn worked the craft booth because of course she did, helping small fingers coax pipe cleaners into stars. Sophie showed up with a knit hat pinned with a tiny moon and notes, the face paint remade into winter. She tugged Michael toward the table, then tugged Evelyn away from it with equal conviction. "We're doing snow angels," she said in a tone that brooked no conversation. "There's barely snow," Evelyn protested, laughing. "It's the principle," Michael said, and his eyes, for the first time, did not bounce away from hers when they reached them. He held the look. The look held back. They found a patch of real snow near the fence where the shade hoarded cold. Sophie flopped first, the way only kids can do without a second thought. Michael hesitated half a beat and then did the ridiculous tender thing, he lay down in his nice coat. Evelyn looked down at the two silhouettes carved into white and thought, this is how families are made, in stupid poses in cold places when someone demands joy. "All the way," Sophie commanded, which left Evelyn no choice. She laid down. The cold took her breath and then gave it back cleaner. They moved their arms in clumsy synchrony, three bodies stamping a pattern into the world that hadn't been there 2 minutes ago. When they stood, they did it carefully, like lifting bread out of the oven. They looked down at the angels they'd left, the wings uneven, the heads a little crooked. Perfect. Sophie slipped her hand into Evelyn's on one side and her father's on the other. "You have to do it together," she said to no one and everyone. "Or the wings don't show." The rest of the festival went the way good small nights do, walking in a triangle that kept finding its shape again, sharing bites of oversugared cookies, losing and finding their place in crowds that knew them. Dana took a picture with her phone of the three of them with lights above their heads, and later she texted it with a caption that said simply, "Look." Sometimes that's all the instruction people need. On the way out, when the air had crossed from festive to actually cold, Michael walked Evelyn to her car. Their steps made the same sound on the gravel, and he thought absurdly that there are worse definitions of compatibility. He didn't make a speech. He had said the speeches in the room with the microphones. What he had left was simpler, and braver for being so. "I like the way you talk to my daughter," he said. "I like the way you talk to me." "I like who you are near her," she said. "I like who you are near me." They stood. There was a point where the space between them felt like a question. They did not answer it with a kiss, not there, not then. They answered it with something steadier. He reached for her hand. She let him have it. The contact felt like what it was, new and old at once, right-sized, not performative, a sentence they could speak later without microphones. When she got home, Evelyn put her keys in the ceramic dish her grandmother had kept by a rotary phone. She sat on the couch and looked at her knuckles, pink from the cold, and laughed once to herself, surprised by happiness that had not barged but arrived with its shoes wiped. She took Sophie's drawing from her tote and pinned it above her desk, a paper room with stars. At his house, Michael stood a long time at the window while Sophie fell asleep with the hat still on, moon pinned above her temple. He thought about the ways he had been careful as a kind of fear and careful as a kind of respect, and how sometimes the difference is whether you invite someone into the decision. He was not a man given to epiphanies. He was a man who built things piece by measured piece. This felt like that. He could build this. Later, days later, when the meeting was a town story and the festival was a sweet one, there would be dinner at his table where Evelyn reached for the salt and he said, "No, taste first," and she did and laughed and said, "Okay, you're right," and that would feel like domesticity's miracle. There would be an afternoon of algebra flashcards done while chili simmered, and another night where Sophie, half asleep, mumbled, "Good sad is brave," and they both looked at each other over her head and understood they had been handed a language and a life by a child. But for now, it was enough that a boardroom had not made them smaller. It was enough that a playground had let them lie down without dignity and get up with it. It was enough that a teacher who keeps tape in her desk had been able to fix something more fragile than paper. It was enough that a father had learned to be loud when it counted and quiet when it mattered. Sometimes the lesson is not grand. Sometimes it is this: you glue down what you love until it looks like a season. You accept that brave can feel like good sad before it feels like good. You let a girl with a moon on her hat tell you where to stand so the wings will show. And when the town quiets and the heater clicks and the apples on the island go soft and sweet, you admit what you have known since the day a woman knelt on a rug and listened to your child until the truth fell out. Love taught you something you didn't know you needed to learn, and you stayed still long enough to learn it. Love has a way of finding us when we least expect it, and sometimes, it's been standing right in front of us all along. If this story touched your heart, don't let it stop here. Subscribe and join our family of believers in love surprises. Share this with someone who still believes in second chances, and tell us in the comments, what would you have done if you were in their shoes? Your words could inspire the next story we tell.